What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Motor Monday, another episode of Grid Encore. I'm your host, Ben Schneider, and look who's back, my regular co-host, Brandon Crossland, after a couple of weeks away. And Tanner Smith is joining us once again as well. Tanner filled in a couple weeks ago and enjoyed it so much, I guess he decided to come back. I know he has some thoughts on the racing that we saw this weekend in Phoenix. Gentlemen, how are you doing tonight? Brandon, I guess we'll start with you. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's another Motor Monday, and good to be back, man. Playoff basketball, it's its own animal, and it keeps us broadcasters away from where we would prefer to be sometimes. And for me, that's Encore. And I've missed this show. I thought I was going to be on here last Monday, and almost thought I wasn't going to be able to be on here this Monday. So thankful those things worked out as we transition from basketball to baseball, high school sports at the stations, and just glad to be back on Grid Encore and talking some NASCAR. I have missed it.
Yeah, glad to have you back. And Tanner, how are you doing?
Doing just fine. I have had a pretty solid day. A happy Mario Day to those that celebrate. Yeah. And I released two more additions to my Mario Kart 8 track rankings today on my own website. So that was pretty fun.
All right. Well, glad to hear. And before we get started, I know we have a lot to discuss. We'll start with the Xfinity Series race. Obviously, I finished that. A lot of people talking, but before we do that, as always here, if I can get the formatting right, there we go. I want to give a shout out to our Patreon investors, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Thank you so much for your continued support of what we do here at the Grid Network. And if you like what you see tonight, you can consider joining them through the link in the description box below. Or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution as well, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link or use the YouTube Super Chat feature if you're watching us live here on YouTube as well. Now, let's start, like I said, with the Xfinity Series and finish that really resembled what we saw across the board. All three races had Joe Gibbs Racing drivers parking in victory lane. We'll get into Brent Crews a little bit later on here, Michelle, in the ARCA race, and, of course, Christopher Bell going 3 in a row yesterday in the Cup race. But all three of them also kind of sliding up the track, coming off of turn 4. And in this particular case, Alex Bowman was on the receiving end of Aric Almirola's move and hit the wall. Still came across the line in second, but nonetheless, it left a sour taste in, I think, a lot of people's mouths. And Tanner, I think we can put you in that group of fans. I know you texted me. I was at the Union Revs game Saturday night, so I didn't watch the race live, but I know you said, hey, save me a spot on Monday's show. I want to talk about this. So since you're our guest, I'll give you the floor first. What was your take on Aric Almirola's move over Alex Bowman to win Saturday night?
My overall take of it was that it was a pretty disgraceful move to make for the victory. Like, I've known Aric Almirola to be a pretty well-respected driver in the Cup Series garage when obviously he raced for Dale Earnhardt Incorporated on through his final season with Stewart-Haas Racing. But, obviously he's had some off-the-track issues since leaving the Cup Series, and some as he was on his way out that for a number of fans definitely soured their, overall view of him as a driver and a person. And I'm going to do my best to not try to bring those aspects into this isolated incident. Now, my problem is Aric Almirola is supposed to be a part-time driver in the Xfinity Series there to teach the younger drivers in the Joe Gibbs Racing pipeline how to race and, essentially pass off the tools of the trade to Brent Crews and the other young drivers such as Jade Avedissian in that Toyota pipeline. And frankly, I feel he failed his test as a mentor in his conduct and the way he handled it the remainder of Saturday evening. Alex Bowman, in an attempt to not end up like Butterbean Queen the previous night, elected to enter the corner high so he could prioritize his exit, knowing full well that Aric Almirola would try to perhaps get into his rear bumper or even move him up the racetrack by nosing further inside and, clipping his left quarter panel. And I have to say for Bowman, that was a pretty savvy move and was about 50 feet away from working until he found himself Deuteronomy deep in the barrier, close to the big green cactus that was the finish line. So there are so many lanes you can take at Phoenix Raceway. I went there for 9 consecutive race weekends between 2019 and 2023. And I often brag about how Phoenix Raceway is underrated in terms of its racing product because it's so wide and has so many grooves and entries and exits that the drivers can take to find speed around the racetrack. And Aric Almirola used every single one of them to make that pass, including the wall. And I just feel like what really made me mad is not even the move necessarily. It was the immediate jump to calling it a clean move by the booth. And I just felt like Jamie McMurray especially, who, again, very well-respected, highly accomplished Cup Series driver and had a pretty significant Xfinity Series career, for someone of his caliber to immediately jump to the defense of the driver in that situation was kind of disgusting, to be frank. When you have a guy drive from the apron all the way to the fence through another car, it leaves a bitter taste in your mouth as a race fan. It doesn't feel like the guy that was on the outside who didn't initiate any contact and, to my knowledge, doesn't have any history with Aric Almirola in the Cup Series. For Almirola to just use him up and use all of him up was pretty disgraceful in my mind. And what was even worse was the booth continuously doubling down on it throughout the remainder of the broadcast that, oh, this move was totally clean. And, you know, your driver, if he was in that position, you would have wanted them to do that. I can personally tell you that if any of the drivers that I have a preference for or had a preference for had done something like that, I would have called them out for it. So, yeah, I just feel like there are a few people in NASCAR media that are kind of wearing their integrity on their sleeve for everybody to see after Saturday night's incident. And the whole fallout of it and the conduct of it were pretty disappointing to me. But I am willing to hear what anybody else has to say on the matter. That might change my mind.
Well, I'll just tell you real quick before, and Brenden, I'll let you jump in here in a second because I know you've been kind of high on Almirola ever since, I think, with 2018 Daytona 500. He was on the receiving end of Wreck for the win in that race. But to Tanner's point, and you can go back, my personal podcast, The Ben Schneider Show, I think it was episode 41. I brought my friend Kyle Murphy on. It was right after the 2021 Bristol Xfinity Series race. That was a finish between AJ Allmendinger and Austin Cindric. And again, very similar style of racing, I guess we saw. And it wasn't just AJ that night. I think it was everybody involved in that finish. Cindric did it at some point. Allgaier did it the start of the overtime restart that we had. But I was just like, look, I wasn't a fan of that. And AJ's been my childhood favorite driver since 2007. And I can't really take joy in celebrating this victory because I don't like how that finish played out. So, I think that sometimes, we as fans obviously have our biases or our preference for one driver or another, but I think it is important to kind of call it as we see it. That being said, Brenden, I know you sent me this picture right before we came on the air. I don't know if you want to use it to help you.
Well, I don't know if I want to now.
You want to make here, but what was your take on the finish that we saw Saturday night between Almirola and Bowman?
I mean, this is why I like having three. First of all, this is why I like having three people on this show when we can. Tanner, the way you're able to tell the story out is just fascinating to me, and I envy folks like you that are able to pit box press. A writer, I assume.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I mean, just I've tried writing. I've been thankful to be able to write for some people in the past. I had to work at it. I had to work hard at it. But I feel like that kind of storytelling is just, it's so easy, and that's really awesome. But also I agree with you on a lot of these points, and it's going to be hard to say that this was clean completely because yes, it was nasty, but all I have to say about it is that he did what he had to do to win the race. No, really, because we hear that all the time. I did what I had to do to win the race, But like, I've watched this from all the different angles that they've given us. Aric Almirola said, "quote I knew I was going to use him up a little bit, but trying to win the race." We've heard this story 1,000 times. Alex Bowman said, "quote I would have hoped he would have given me a lane on exit." So you're absolutely right. Where Alex Bowman positioned himself, again, no history with Aric Almirola. He put himself on the outside and, had every right to make his way through there. But the only reason I sent Ben that picture is because I feel like that's the angle that Jamie Mack and Adam Alexander and Kligerman were seeing there in the booth. I see the tire treads there. I mean, clearly loss of control, over driving the race car coming out of turn. It's so confusing at Phoenix. 3, 4. I think it's 4. you know what I'm talking about. Just coming loose out of there, and then you heard Aric say he decided to throttle up. Now, again, trying to make this a single thing. I know he's had some weird stuff happen in the Joe Gibbs training programs and things that I don't like either. But trying to make this a single incident. The way I saw it, which has no merit at all, in the split seconds afterward, he decided to throttle up to give himself a chance, for goodness sakes. Both of his gloves and gravity putting himself against Bowman and into the wall. That's where gravity was leading him already, as you see those tire treads there. So meritless, baseless completely. I submit to you, Almirola was regaining control of the car and also choosing to move Alex Bowman at the same time. And then bottom line, we have seen much more obvious wallings of drivers in the past than that. If I was a prosecutor, which this is what it feels like almost on a weekly basis here on Encore, we get to go back and investigate crime scenes. But I don't feel like I have enough evidence to know his veracity towards Alex Bowman to I'm going to ram this guy into the mud. I don't give a flip. I don't think that's what happened here. I feel like he was losing control and he just, like you're at a go-kart track with your buddies, you just gas, to get to the line. It's right there. And the win is right there. And I don't know if you can call yourself a race car driver if you're in that moment right there and you don't put the throttle down. Yes, he's getting to the wall. The only other option in that moment is to lift. Alex Bowman seemed to lift. Do you think he was lifting? Do you think he had the hammer down? It's such an isolated incident, and I don't. Again, this is where my argument falls apart. But I'll leave it at that. I think that we've seen much more obvious wallings than that, and I don't think that Aric deserves the slashing that he's gotten on social media for being just the demon in all of this.
Well, I'll tell you this, Brenden. First and foremost, I've worked with you this is our 4th season doing the show now. I don't want you to sell yourself short here. One thing nobody can accuse you of is not being a smart, educated race fan who gives good takes on this show. So I don't want you to say it's completely meritless or something. I mean, obviously you have your opinions here, and we're having this conversation, but
I just put stuff out in spurts. That's how my thought process goes.
Sure, but
I actually had to write things out for today. That never happens. It's always just off the cuff.
That's all right. But that shows how much you're taking this seriously. You want to make sure you're articulating your points well, and I think that there's something to be said about that. But again, that being said, Tanner, I don't know if you have any follow-up thoughts on what Brenden had to say there about the finish.
I mean, I can't necessarily prove without having the raw data ahead of me that Almirola turned right at any point coming to the line there to put Bowman in the wall, but it looked pretty apparent to me from the multiple views that they gave us that Almirola just did not care that Bowman was there. And to your point about go-karting and all that, and you can't call yourself a racer, well, you can, because in Formula One or any open wheel series, you can't just clean the guy out beside you, it could cause a major accident that could be life-threatening. This is a stock car thing purely and wholly. But this is coming from somebody that thinks that Aric Almirola and his place in NASCAR history is warranting of him being a Hall of Famer. And I just didn't feel that that move was befitting of somebody that should have that jacket and should have a plaque at the Hall of Fame. It was just not the kind of move that I feel like anybody wanted to see, and that's why Brent Crews didn't do it the day before. That's why Daniel Hemrick didn't do it 4 years ago in the Xfinity Championship race against Austin Cindric, when it would have been more than easy to do so. Christopher Bell also did not replicate this same maneuver the following day on the overtime restart in the Cup race. I just don't think you have to completely clean a guy out to win a race. And I just feel like with there not being any sort of like ulterior motive available that we can readily point to, considering that, like we have all three said, that Almirola and Bowman don't really have any sort of a history that we know of, I just don't really see the crime fitting the punishment of this move, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, I get wanting to win like any race, any random race, and Almirola obviously only has so many attempts this year in the Xfinity Series car, but
as just Bowman. I mean,
yeah, that was actually Bowman's one race. I made sure to check that
really?
after the race, and in front of his hometown crowd, which I'm sure they were
that
not.
Sucks.
Yeah, I'm sure they were not very pleased in the Tucson area about that move, but I don't know. I felt like it was a pretty callous move, and I really didn't care for Almirola's explanations for it after the race. They kind of felt very unabashed, and I think I would have liked to have seen someone who is such a fervent follower of Christ be a little bit more repentant of such a greedy move, which is ultimately what it was. It was an extremely greedy maneuver to take up the entire racetrack and act like your opponent was not there in order to cross the finish line first, when he could have just tried to drag him out to the line and let the cards fall where they may and race somewhat fairly to a guy that had done nothing but race him fairly to that point. So I guess that's all I really have to say on the matter, is that it was disappointing, and everything surrounding it has kind of been disappointing too.
Yeah, I think that the options given for the ARCA race and the Cup race to finish clean were possible for that driver to be clean and win the race. I feel like the Xfinity Series race gave us the rare instance where racing clean, if you're the 19, does not in fact give you the win, and you could still call yourself a racer, but you're the racer that finished second. I mean, it's just like the chance of you winning in that split second moment is zero, and he made the split second decision. Now I'm also with you. I don't think a follower of Christ needs to be just completely like hard nosed when he gets to the interview. Just, I did what I had to do. But like, I feel like also Aric probably sees his job as, I'm to win races for Joe Gibbs. This is my job. This is what I signed a contract for. I don't think he should be teaching the younger generation to drive that way. I'm with you there. But yeah, I'm also not happy with the way he dealt with it. I feel like there could have been a little more like, yeah, I hate that it ended up that way. Sort of, I don't know. That I feel that way too.
Well, Brenden, just to follow up here, I see this comment from Adam, and I'll highlight this in my one shining moment as well. Give credit to Ryan Sieg finishing fourth this time is coming to win an Xfinity race. Brenden, and Tanner, I actually don't know where you stand on the issue of Cup drivers racing Xfinity and trucks. Obviously, Bowman full-time for Hendrick Motorsports. Like you said, this was his one race this year. I know Brenden and I tend to not be a fan of the practice of bushwhacking, so to speak, but Brenden, I guess I'll go to you first in this follow-up. If that had been Ryan Sieg instead of Alex Bowman, does that change how you look at this finish?
I'm telling you, you're just setting us up.
I'm just asking.
If that was Alex LeBay, I mean, you can go on. I mean, if that was Kyle Sieg, if that was Ryan Sieg, if that was
Anthony
David
Alfredo.
Starr, Anthony Alfredo. Yeah, I mean, heck,
If it had been an independent Xfinity Series team and driver instead of a Cup leech, does that change how you view the move Almirola made?
You know, if they did that, we probably would still be crying foul because, like, yeah, they don't belong up there, and there they go, just taking what doesn't belong to them. And if it was Alex Bowman that did that move, we'd get the Hendrick army coming in and just defending him to the death. And we all know that. But that is, I mean, again, that doesn't need to be argued. But yeah, Ryan Sieg, that would be a tough one. But again, it's hard for me to be consistent. Like some of these other judgment calls for officiating, it's hard for me to be consistent on a sport that is consistently not the same
Consistently
every single time.
Like we always say, yeah, for sure.
Just to kind of briefly touch on my overall thoughts about Xfinity and trucks being infiltrated by Cup Series stars.
Sure.
I think we found the happy medium with the Kyle Busch rule of 5 per season for each series if you have been in the Cup Series for more than 5 years. I think that's a perfectly fine amount for drivers of veteran caliber coming back down to the lower series and racing for whatever their motive is, whether it's I need more track time or I want to win, which I think as Brenden so politely put it, winning is everything. So
well, and I'll tell you, I was there covering the race for Brock Beard and NASCAR.info. Aric Almirola did that at Sonoma in 2023, driving for Ryan Sieg's team. Obviously, a lot of influence in that car that day in a big technical alliance there. But yeah, that is kind of ironic, just thinking of that connection there.
But yeah, to touch on the hypothetical of if it was an Xfinity regular, even let's just take it even further out. Like, let's not make it like somebody that's an independent, like a fan favorite kind of person like Sieg is. Even if this was someone like Brandon Jones or Sammy Smith, I would have had a problem with this.
It almost was Brandon Jones.
It gone
a little bit differently. It would have been Brandon.
That's true. Jones was right there.
And he would have walled him, I'm sure. He probably would have done much worse. That's just assuming.
Yeah. But I think that the blowback would have been a lot more severe had it not been, a Cup regular. And I think that speaks to me to the severity of the incident. I think that for people to have had such a loud outcry about it, for someone that races once a year in that series, I'd say it was a pretty impactful moment amongst the fan base for them to be yelling so loudly about it, me included. So my final thoughts on this are, I'm going to be honest, if I was NASCAR officiating, I think I may have taken the win from him personally. I think that this is the kind of move that we do not want to see replicated. Can we all agree on that? We wouldn't want our drivers ending every race like this.
Not every race, but I feel like there's enough of it in NASCAR's past that it would be kind of. I mean, is there not
the wall like that?
Like not intentionally putting people in the wall. Again, I don't think it was 100% intentional to put him into the wall. And that's hard. Again, that's hard to argue. I know, because I wasn't there. I don't know the telemetry.
This to me is like a half step or a quarter step below, like Austin Dillon diving into turn 3 at full speed and plowing through Joey Logano's bumper to me. Like that, it was a move that reeked of desperation, and I think had Bowman had been scraping the wall and not, several foam barriers into the wall like he ended up being, Bowman probably wins that race. And, Almirola can still say afterwards, I was willing to give it all it took without, absolutely killing the guy. But clearly after the race, that was not his attitude. He had a very, I'm going to say, rosy tinted picture of what happened afterwards. He was like, I didn't junk Bowman, but you kind of did. That car was billowing smoke like clouds after the finish line. So it'll be interesting to hear from the Hendrick engineering department on how not junked that car ended up being. But I would just like to say, like, I don't think that I want to see that kind of finish and that kind of maneuver be replicated going forward. And I would hope that in the event that this happens again, and hopefully it would never happen at the championship race, but this is the kind of things they set this track up for when they reconfigured it. I'm just of the opinion that we can't have guys just stuffing other guys into the wall like this to win a race. And if it had been me in the booth, I probably would have put him at the end of the lead lap and called it a day very quickly.
Yeah, well, I'll just give my thoughts here briefly, and then we can move on because I know we've got other things to discuss tonight. I think I'm somewhere in between both of you. I don't think it was the most egregious thing I've ever seen. I think Austin Dillon last year at Richmond is a perfect example of that. And
absolutely,
at the bare minimum, at least Bowman did still come across the line in second. I know it obviously doesn't mean as much to somebody like him since he's not running the series for points or whatever, but it's not like he got completely turned or hooked in the right rear like Denny Hamlin did just a couple of seconds later in that finish with Austin Dillon. So that being said, I think there have been far more egregious issues of intentional wrecks in the history of the sport. And Brandon, to your point as well, I haven't seen with telemetry. I don't know fully what Aric Almirola's intentions were. If he did get loose, if he wasn't fully intending on walling him, or if, he was just I'm going to try to win at all costs. I think only Aric knows that for sure, whoever has access to telemetry in full. That being said, I wouldn't call the finish clean. I think that's certainly a massive reach if Aric's going to try to argue that. And clean. I do agree with Tanner's point here. It reminds me a lot of you want to talk about a young driver in the Gibbs development line. How about Ty Gibbs himself? And thinking back to again, ironically, Brandon Jones was also involved in this finish as well with the 2022 Martinsville race to not even lock himself into a championship 4 because he was already in. Brandon Jones was trying to win the race to get into a championship 4, and Ty Gibbs still didn't care. He completely cleaned him out. And, I think that, again, but maybe that's – I can also see a counter argument where it's like, is the blame really belonging to Aric Almirola, or is that just kind of the culture that we've manifested in the sport nowadays where moves like that, because they've gone unpenalized, are deemed acceptable? And, you might have some people upset on social media. You might have some drivers upset in the post-race press conferences, but then, the series moves on to the next race and everybody kind of moves on and forgets about it and becomes history there. And they still write your name on that trophy and it's still in the record books for all of history. So I don't know. I think there's a lot, obviously, of a conversation. That's why we spent almost the first half hour of the show on it. And I think that, there's merit to both sides of the argument in my estimation. And, like I said, I sound like a broken record on this show because there are very few issues in this sport where I don't at least understand where both sides of the argument are coming from. Again, I don't think it was the most egregious thing I've ever seen, but I also wouldn't call it clean and wish that we could get cleaner finishes to these races. And you all know how I feel about overtime. You know how I feel about, kind of the culture that we have in the sport nowadays. I hope we can continue to improve upon that going forward. And I guess we'll just leave it at that. Let's move on now. Let's stay in the Xfinity Series. This was a talking point, especially with viewers in the Atlanta area. I think the CW broadcast on the white flag lap, cutting away in the middle of the overtime finish. And that brought up a larger conversation. I was personally not aware. I've had no issues in the Boston area, the market that I'm in, with my local affiliate. People have said they couldn't get the CW through their YouTube TV package. People have said that the CW affiliates that their feeds are bringing in are substituting local programming at their own discretion. Apparently, they have the right to do that. NASCAR not too happy about that. Tanner, what are your thoughts on the current state of this deal with the CW here for the Xfinity Series? We're 4 races in now. Sounds like maybe NASCAR didn't do their homework necessarily on what all the independent CW affiliates have the right to do during these broadcast windows.
Well, technically, we are 12 races deep into this because they had the
True,
last
yes.
8 of last season. So it's pretty telling that NASCAR and the CW and their parent company had not gotten this figured out at some point during the offseason, especially when you're kicking off a 7-year deal. So I was a person that was personally affected by this mess. So for the first 122 laps of this event, I was unable to legally view the race on YouTube TV through the CW affiliate in the Green Bay area. I was unfortunately saddled with watching the Wisconsin State Hockey Championship for high school boys, which congrats to whichever team ended up winning that. But I did get to watch the last 78 laps of the race, and I am debatably grateful for that. But yeah, it's pretty unacceptable at this point for NASCAR and the CW to have not had some form of fix for this. We're, again, several months, several weeks into this season, into this partnership between these two parties that they had a whole off season to sort this kind of technological buffoonery out. And I'm a little surprised, but a little not, that they haven't gotten anything done. But frankly, it's very much within NASCAR's history, especially with their broadcast partners, to be more reactive than proactive. So I guess at the end of the day, I'm not terribly surprised that we're still having these kinds of silly issues popping up, but I really would like to see them get it straightened out, especially as high school sports start to ramp up in the springtime here up in the Midwest. So, Brenden, I know you probably wanted to chime in on this.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I would really not like that if that was in the Nashville market. That's where I'm located, and so I hear it happen in the Green Bay area. That's not cool. But where I saw it happen was the Atlanta market. Gray Media, Peachtree TV, owned by Gray Media, put out a statement on behalf of the CW that Stern had put out on X, and it's, quote, "We appreciate that our affiliates are still learning the power of our new programming and the implications that has for serving our collective viewers. Our local affiliate in Atlanta has acknowledged the mistake in prematurely ending coverage of yesterday's NASCAR Xfinity Series race, and we have been assured this will not happen again. We will continue to work closely with our affiliates to ensure that the entire NASCAR Xfinity Series continues to receive the premium treatment racing fans deserve." They also discovered quite quickly how loud racing fans are when they don't get their candy. So especially when you have, and it's not somebody at these affiliates, because I mean, as a radio affiliate for NASCAR Cup Series races in our local Middle Tennessee market, I understand the whole. I'm the one that puts the satellite commands in for those things to click on. So a lot of familiarity with that. But when it comes to the TV, like, there's not someone standing there seeing the white flag and going, "Oh wait, put our program on," like switch it over and let's ruin these people's day. Come on, do it. Like, it's something that's done like days ago. I promise you, there's probably nobody watching that feed from the that actually works for that programming. They've already scheduled this out days ago, and so what's happening is just a failure to communicate. Quite simply, as you said, they've had with the NBC crew doing the CW for the last tail end of the year in 2024. But yeah, something that should have been figured out by now. And it feels like NASCAR just assumed that this was okay when they made the new TV deal, that and it's what we all kind of understood, that everyone was going to have access in all markets of the whatever you call it, United States, all, that everyone was going to be okay, but clearly not. I think this is something that we don't have to be, upset about it, but like, I feel like it's something that they're going to get a lot of heat for, and they already have, and it's going to be sorted out here very soon. If NASCAR has anything to say about it.
Yeah, I can't help but think back to the first race of the ESPN TV deal with Formula One in 2018, and how there were side-by-side commercials. They were simulcasting the Sky Speed. They somehow had technical difficulties doing that, even though all they were supposed to be doing was simulcasting what Sky was doing, and Sky had no technical difficulties on their end. And then we had commercial breaks that were cutting David Croft and Martin Brundle off mid-sentence, and viewers weren't happy. But ESPN put out a statement and made very clear, we hear you guys, this isn't going to happen again. And every race since then in this current era of F1 TV rights in the U.S. has been broadcast commercial-free. So if the CW wants to show to NASCAR fans that they are that serious about taking their critiques to heart here, I've got a feeling that we're going to see things start to improve. Then again, I think back to some of the complaints we've had about Fox and NBC broadcasts over the last 10 years and how those networks have sometimes fallen short. And I think, if anything, a lot of times the issues have only been compounded over the years. And I mean, you can just scroll through the broadcast or scroll through the Twitter timelines or Blue Sky timelines, whatever microblogging platform you're on during any Fox race these days. I think you can hear the complaints loud and clear. I think Fox still has a lot of work to do to regain the fans' trust in terms of their NASCAR coverage. So it's going to be interesting to see how the CW responds to this. Looks like Adam's saying his local affiliate has been showing the races no problem. So that's good to hear for the folks in North and South Carolina. Again, that's obviously where the heart of the sport is in many respects. So I can't say I'm too surprised that that market is getting them without issue. But yeah, in some of the markets where high school sports might be fairly big and some of those events might be televised, we're getting into that, kind of spring season here. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how local affiliates handle that going forward. So Tanner, I'm sorry to hear that you missed the first part of the race there, but we'll see if the CW can make up for that here as the season continues on.
Hey, social media kept me updated, so thank God for that. And yeah, I was still able to see the major Austin Hill mishap. So I still kept up with the major events. That's what social media is for.
Yeah. Well, and it's been unfortunate because I think people were making the comparisons. They were like, between Big Fox and Big NBC, you've got only 9 cup races on network television. And when you hear this deal announced, you think of after the Big Four, CBS, Fox, ABC, NBC, I think the CW is kind of like the 5th place major broadcast network TV station. So technically speaking, it's like, okay, all 33 races on network TV for the Xfinity Series, that's a big deal. But if local affiliates are having issues like this, how much of a win really is it then for the race fans? So again, hopefully these issues will be resolved. I know YouTube TV has had some issues as well in different markets, but we'll see how that turns out going forward.
In comparison with the other national networks, they are, I think I would venture to say, they're fairly new in the grand scheme of things. And also, to their credit, it's amazing to have no sign-in access, no sign-in stuff to go to watch practice and qualifying. I think that's wonderful. And also there's the in-car cameras that they give as a selection. Now I know that's part of the gripe. Like, I can watch all this, but I can't watch the race. They need to fix that on their app. They need to get with the times and give people the sign-in option on the CW app, because not everybody, you need to make sure there are all the different ways possible to be able to watch the content needs to be available. And that's one thing that all the other networks have had in place for years, and they need to step that up, and I'm sure they know that. Again, that's what I say with Ben a lot. Like, things that need to happen network-wise, like, I'm sure they're already getting on that. I like to trust, as opposed to others, I like to trust the people who get paid the money to be thinking about these things.
Can I hop in, actually?
Sure. Go ahead.
Because I don't know if that's true. Because this exact issue happened to me for the Phoenix Championship race with the CW last year. I couldn't watch it. So I feel like if they didn't take concern seriously when their most marquee Xfinity Series event took place, because I'm sure I wasn't the only person throughout the nation affected by that, how seriously are they really taking it at this point, considering we're, again, week 12 through a 7-year contract, and we still don't have this resolved, especially with the whole offseason in between to troubleshoot these kinds of issues. So I'm going to be honest, I don't know if they are really getting on to it, because if they were, I feel like with the amount of money, power, and resources they have at their disposal, they should have been able to figure out a solution by now. And they just either haven't considered a solution to it, or they've not really considered it much of an issue to warrant solving. So, yeah, I feel like my patience might be wearing a little bit thin about this now that I had that memory in mind. But yeah, I don't feel like I should have to resort to getting a VPN and changing my zip code to be able to watch the Xfinity Series live.
I feel like this is like you need to write your local congressman sort of thing. Like, I think this is like an issue like based on different affiliates. They're like, because last year, whenever it was with NBC on the Nashville, at least on the Nashville affiliate, the races, the audio would keep going. There'd be little spurts where the audio would keep going, but the video just would stop. And I was like, what's going on? And I found out it was just with Nashville's CW. Like, it was, I don't know what, like, CW was the only one that was having problems like that. That was through YouTube TV.
And I think the optimistic response to that would be, I think the cries from the race fans have been louder this weekend than they ever have been, especially in the Atlanta area, to have, the race cut out on the worst possible. I mean, that happened with FS1, I think, and it was the truck race that Todd Gilliland won for KBM. I think that was 2019, if I recall correctly, where their feed went out and then they came back and you saw he was doing the burnouts or whatever. So
Kyle Busch in your motorhome.
Yeah, that was the one. But yeah, I think that sometimes it takes because like I said, I hadn't really been aware that these things were happening, and I assume they've been happening on a weekly basis in certain markets until this weekend. And I think having the Atlanta affiliate put that statement out, having so many fans start to take this issue seriously. I think Jacob Seelman was saying, hey, if you've been affected by this, I'm opening up my DMs. Let's talk about it. So I don't know if he's working on some sort of a story or investigative piece there to find out what's going on. But, again, I think that if it's a louder cry from the fans, then it becomes something that maybe is harder for the networks to ignore. And maybe, and again, this might just be my, too much optimism coming from my end of things, but maybe that's something that gets these conversations started and actually leads to an improved product. And also, because Tanner, thank you for correcting me. Of course, I still think of that as NBC because it was their production team and their broadcasters and everything, but it was airing on the CW for the last 8 races. So this is really race 12 of this new deal here. But it is the first full season. They are a new broadcast partner, and I think unfortunately we frequently see this here. Towards the end of a TV deal, maybe networks kind of check out a little bit, especially if it's a lame duck year. But when you're when you're a brand new partner, you're just starting out, I think you want to try to show your audience that you're serious about this partnership. So, again, I think there's reason to be cautiously optimistic, but only time's going to tell in the end. All right, we will move on now to the race on Friday night. And again, like I mentioned, kind of a similar finish here. Brenden Queen, the dominant car of the day, thought he had the race wrapped up, and then on the white flag lap, a back marker brought out a caution, leading us to ARCA's version of the green-white checkered rule. We'll get into Tim Beans in just a moment, but first, Tanner, I know obviously you had very strong thoughts in the Xfinity Series race. Butterbean Queen, I think, was a little bit miffed at how that finish turned out. I'm sure it wasn't just with Brent Crews. It was probably with ARCA's overtime rules and him being on the receiving end of that, unfortunately for him this weekend. But do you think he also has a right to be upset with the move that Gibbs' ARCA driver made in the same way that the Xfinity Series driver did the night after that?
Miffed, I think, is a perfect verb for what he should be. I think that overall, Brent Crews used a pretty savvy old school move where he dipped his car, which was following closely behind another car, about a half groove lower than Brenden Queen, and was able to loosen him up using the packed air on his spoiler. And then, yes, there was some mild contact, but he didn't clean Queen out. He didn't really throttle up through him, quite like Almirola did, and motored on to the finish. Now, I think Queen's main ire should be directed at ARCA in their rule book, because he was a quarter mile from victory, and then a car that's laying idle on the apron brings out the caution. Oh, we got to rack him back up for a double file restart. And then he got another great restart, got out to the lead, and I believe we had another yellow after that. And then we had to run another several laps under caution. We had to put Speedy Dry out there to clean up oil that was left on the track by ailing cars, and then do it all over again for another double file restart.
Yeah, that was Tyler Reif, who ended up one position ahead of Tim Means, but he hit the inside wall hard on that restart, didn't turn. I think that was off the bumper of Thad Moffat, if I recall correctly.
It very much was, unfortunately. And yeah, I think that Queen's issues should be 90% squared towards ARCA and its officiating and the drivers that unfortunately brought those yellows out. But yeah, I mean, contact of that nature on the final lap should be somewhat expected, and I didn't see anything too egregious, and I didn't feel like Crews just kind of throttled through him or anything like that, and cranked the wheel to the right to put him in the wall. I just it seemed like a relatively tidy finish to me, and if I were Butterbean, I wouldn't be too mad at Brent Crews, especially considering they have raced so much together in the Cars Tour, and they'll definitely be racing each other through ARCA throughout the rest of this year at select dates. So if I were Butterbean, I'd probably just keep that one in my back pocket in case I need to move the 18 car at some point, and just keep it at that.
Yeah, how about that? 2 double overtime after the white flag, and we still get the 18 and 28 cars finishing 1-2. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Brandon, what are your thoughts on the ARCA? And I guess ARCA West, it was a combo race. Lots of West Series regulars out there as well. What were your thoughts on the race and the finish?
I enjoyed this General Tire 150. I was grilling chicken whilst listening and watching outside. It was great. Almost felt like it was spring for a moment. But yeah, there's something amiss here with ARCA's concept of overtime when it doesn't align with NASCAR's top 3 series. Why we can't be finishing like we do with the Truck Series, Xfinity, or Cup, or we have to have the green flag finish in ARCA, is really where I think Butterbean's main gripe needs to be. Same as Tanner here. And yeah, I think it's really cool that both of these have the history with each other in the Cars Tour. And I do think Butterbean, if given the option, would have probably lovingly moved Brent in the same way to get the win. And that's more exciting for us to see in the future if this comes back to bite Brent. And because Butterbean, he's got a fast car for this year. I mean, look, you already got Daytona out of the way, and you got the real racetrack here at Phoenix. He's still fast. So really looking forward to seeing what Brenden Queen can do in the ARCA Menards Series. But yeah, we got compared to what happened the next day, this one was clean and also close, hard-nosed racing. But really, it comes back to, I know ARCA used to be its own independent thing and now acquired in the NASCAR universe. Still think we're gonna have a theme park one day. It's called NASCAR Speed Park. It's in Gatlinburg.
Oh yeah,
yeah. But it's just the other go-kart tracks are just as good as that one. Trust me. But yeah, the overtime rule in ARCA doesn't need to be different now. I mean, it may have been that way in the past, but we're absorbed now in the NASCAR bubble. It needs to align with where these drivers are gonna go in the future.
I would actually say that it would be more beneficial to ARCA, its drivers, its teams, its officiating crew, if they actually just said, no, we're going to actually break tradition from NASCAR and end it under
yellow
regulation.
Oh, regulation. Okay. Yeah.
These younger drivers do not need infinite attempts to finish the race. It's just not cost effective. at all.
Yeah, especially with lower budget teams. Yeah. We're about to get into that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say this here. I know we're following our outline. We kind of merged these two bullet points here, but I will just say this: it is my understanding. And I before I get into the argument, I guess I should say, like, people know how I reacted to the Indy 500 finish in 2023. I'm not a fan of red flagging the race to get a green flag finish at all costs, but I will take that over what NASCAR does in extending the race. At the bare minimum, the Indianapolis 500 still ended at mile number 500 in 2023, and for that I'm very thankful. But I will still take what NASCAR does over what ARCA does here, because it is my understanding that when the white flag comes out, that flag, by definition, means that whatever flag comes out next, whether it's a yellow one or a checkered one, is going to mark the conclusion of the race. And apparently in ARCA, that's not the situation that we have here. So I understand the desire for a green flag finish. I have said in the past that if you want to compromise, if you want to come to the negotiating table with me, I will grant you that you can have your one attempt. This is the era that we're in now. We've been doing this for 21 years, however long it's been. You can have your one attempt. That's fine. And I'll even maybe grant you the one attempt in ARCA, but it's got to come out before the white flag. And that's the only attempt we're going to do. I think the ARCA overtime rules are particularly insane. And we see this on super speedways as well, because it takes them almost a full lap to get up to speed. I mean, there's no time to really put any sort of run together. It makes it even more pointless on those tracks. And I know we have a lot of time off before we go to Talladega being the next race, but yeah, I mean, I don't really need to explain where I stand. If it were up to me, if I ruled the world, we would just abolish overtime across the board in NASCAR and ARCA. But I think especially for these young drivers, you know, who are more mistake prone, more accident prone, and we saw it in the very first one with Moffitt and Rife there. You know, it leads to the opportunity. The 2023 Phoenix Championship race in the Truck Series, the perfect example of that. You know, it leads to more chaos and controversy than is necessary. And I understand ending under yellow is a buzzkill, but sometimes I will take a buzzkill over, you know, the insanity that we see, you know, with double. And I mean, we saw it at Nashville last year, quintuple overtime. I mean, I'm just not particularly a fan.
I'm so sorry, Nashville Super Speedway. Sorry you had to see that.
Y'all should feel sorry for me. I was trying to get on a plane and watch the race on my phone, and thankfully the plane just didn't take off. But I was just like, can you all please just end this race so I can see the end of it?
I'm about to go into airplane mode here. We need to end this thing.
Literally, I didn't want to have to pay for the Wi-Fi for the plane.
Yeah, well, and the ripple effect that had, because who won that race? Who locked himself into the playoffs? Who went on to win the championship? I mean,
champion.
Just whoops, here we go, championship.
Oh, frick.
That's 3, baby. Woo.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, and
I told Ben that last year, like, whoever wins, we're gonna have to hear their soundbite for the entire next year on Sirius XM. So just be ready for whoever it is.
We could have had a second year of Blaney, but no, we can't have that.
I mean, Blaney's sound bites are also kind of cringy too.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, in fairness, maybe if you play that game, you have to give Logano Richmond, but if we don't do overtime, Dylan wins Richmond anyway. So I think that's a moot point in and of itself there. But yeah, I mean, I understand, Tanner, the point. I know you said you put in our private chat here, Truck's been doing it for 31 years now, ever since they started. So I guess, you know, if you have a brand new series, you want to do something different and create a new tradition in that sense, you know, maybe that's a little more understandable. But I believe, I'm sorry, I think numbers mean something. I think you even have it here in this low level ARCA race, right? General Tire 150. That 150 is not arbitrary. If you want to die in your overtime hill, let's just call it, I guess, you know, Grand Prix is more of a road racing term, right? But, you know, the ARCA West combo race at Phoenix, come up with a name that doesn't include an advertised distance.
Yeah, I don't think an oval should be called a Grand Prix.
Our fans into believing that you're going to see 150 laps or miles or kilometers or whatever it is, only if the race ends under green. If it doesn't end under green, we're going to extend the race, and the race name now becomes meaningless and actually incorrect.
Yeah.
So the only properly titled races are the Bass Pro Shops night race and the Echo Park Automotive Grand Prix that was last week. So
sure, yeah.
There we go.
And the La Luna in Xfinity.
Oh yeah,
that's next week.
Yeah, well, but that's the point. I remember I was on this very show last year, and Brenden, we were having this discussion. We had 2 races back to back: the night race, the Bass Pro Shops night race, whatever the sponsor is there, and then it's the Go Bowling at the Glen. That race didn't have an advertised distance.
Yeah, just go bowling.
I don't think it's that hard. If you want to die on the overtime hill, don't give us an advertised distance. Just say we're gonna have a scheduled number of laps, and these are the rules that we have here. But you put 500 in the name. I'm sorry. Kyle Busch won the Daytona 500. Ricky Stenhouse won the Daytona 530 or whatever it was a couple of years ago. So, but again, we can continue to beat that dead horse all day long here. Fans, I think, know where I stand on that issue here. Let's catch up on the chat, and then we'll move on to our open segment, a soundbite or a quote at least that has me a little bit fired up. You want to talk about inconsistencies, but let's see what Joe has to say here. Good to see him chat, Joe. I don't think many fans like ARCA's green flag finish rule. I haven't seen a public poll, but to start the last lap multiple times just doesn't add to the product. Well, again, I mean, that's what I frequently say here. And this time the end result did change. I think Butterbean pretty much had the win in hand, unless he had a mechanical failure of some sort on the last lap or something. He was going to win that race regardless. Brent Crews ends up winning this one, but frequently we don't even get a change for results or get a change to any of the top 5. So then it kind of just leaves you scratching your head like, what's the point there? Good to see one of our regulars, Denver Thurston in the chat. Butterbean, neat name for NASCAR. That is, I think, a Hall of Fame level nickname for Brendan Queen. I will completely agree with you there. No offense to ARCA. Could you at least send a top-notch NASCAR rep to clean up ARCA races? ARCA becoming funny farm. No offense. I don't know. I think NASCAR's kind of had some of those races of their own, even Cup Series in recent years. So I don't know if that's necessarily the solution there.
I was going to say, do we really want Elton Sawyer going down there and straightening things out? He hasn't really straightened things out for Cups. So what good could he do down there?
Yeah. Well, think back to the Xfinity controversy at the Roval last year. Parker Kligerman thinking that he had won that race, and then you find out that the yellow light came on when he was inches away from taking the white. It probably should have come on even earlier, but they were so late to it, and then they still. I don't know. That's a whole mess and a can of worms. Not worth reopening here tonight. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, NASCAR's had plenty of those issues in the top 3 series as well. $10 plain Wi-Fi to watch overtime. LOL. Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily. I don't know if you're getting your money's worth there with what we saw last night at least, or this weekend rather. Denver also saying ARCA should bring a time race, say like 90 minutes from green to white flags,
like Indy Next.
Yeah,
you know what? We're just gonna get it over with.
I'm not inherently against time race. I mean, I understand their purpose. Like if you have I don't know. I guess the traditional time limit for road racing, Grand Prix racing, I guess is 2 hours, right? So we've seen that in Singapore. Sometimes it's the longest F1 race, and if there's weather and the start has been delayed a little bit, sometimes they'll cap that race a few laps early and they'll go to a timed race. But yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I guess we saw it in Chicago last year as well. So it's not entirely unprecedented, but I think for a race like Phoenix, I don't know if that's something that ARCA would necessarily be likely to institute, at least any time in the near future. All right. Well, we have one more comment. Let's see Joe here. Okay. If Fox said we'll show ARCA, but have to be done in 90 minutes or less, that time limit would be great. I think we kind of ran into that actually at Talladega a couple of years ago. I think we got word that like with 10 to go, it's going to be, either we'll run the rest of the races, the rest of the race green to the end, or if a caution comes out, we'll end it there. And that's ultimately, I think, what happened with 7 to go. And my reaction to that was like, if I'm running in second place, why don't I just hook the leader on the backstretch and bring a caution out, and then I'll be in contention to win there. So that was a rule that I wasn't particularly a big fan of for that reason, number one, but also number two, I think if TV broadcast windows have that much of a say in the on-track product, I think we've kind of overstepped there. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing for the sport, but it is something to consider, I guess, for the future if we want to take a look at how these races are being run here.
If you're looking for Big East basketball, it's on FS2.
Yeah,
we're trying to settle this out.
It was crazy. I can't remember what game Fox had on the other night, but it was at halftime by the time that we made it to
I
the
think
air.
it was like Colorado State and Boise State or something. I know it's
Yeah.
the time of year for college basketball, but yeah, just with how much that race got extended, as soon as it switched over, I was like, holy cow, the first half is almost over. That's
like poor basketball fans.
Yeah.
Like, imagine people like that's all they watch, you know? Like,
yeah. And hey, FS2 is not as widely available as FS1. It's not like ESPN and ESPN2 where they're like, you know, right next to each other on your
satellite packages don't provide that.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people that even what is it now, 11 and a half, 12 years into the FS1, FS2 era. I think FS2 is still you know, much lower on the TV package hierarchy there. So yeah, unfortunate for the basketball fans as well. And hey, all the more reason to end the race at a scheduled distance regardless. But what do I know?
Gotta share the floor.
Yeah. All right, let's move on now. I've got some thoughts on this open segment here. And if you guys don't mind, I want to start out here because I just thought this was the most hilarious, ironic quote that I've seen in our sport in a really long time. As you all know, obviously there's a lawsuit and a counter lawsuit now going on between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports as well over the charter agreement. And we got a quote this week, and I want to make sure I get this title right here. This is an article from the Associated Press. If I remember after Michelle, I'll put a link in the description or a pinned comment or whatever. This is NASCAR attorney Christopher Yates, and I'll start quoting the article verbatim here, went so far as to tell the Associated Press that Curtis Polk, who in addition to being Michael Jordan's business manager, is a co-owner of 2311, along with three-time Daytona 500 winner Denny Hamlin, does not understand the NASCAR business model. And it goes on, and there's this quote that says, "I don't think Mr. Polk really understands the sport," Yates told the AP. "I think he came into it, and his view is that it should be much more like the NBA or other league sports. But it's not. No motorsport is like that. He's done a lot of things that might work in the NBA or might be okay in the NBA, but are just not appropriate in NASCAR." And of course, I couldn't help but think back to the last 21, 22 years of NASCAR history and certain things that have been introduced into our sport. We decided that when Matt Kenseth clinched the championship by simply taking the green flag at Homestead, despite winning only one race in 2003, that we wanted to spice things up a little bit in the postseason, so to speak, for NASCAR. And so we instituted the chase for the NASCAR Nextel Cup, which has since been renamed the playoffs. We just got done talking about how fans don't like when races end under caution, so we're going to extend the race to give fans a green, white, checkered finish, which we have since renamed overtime. We have also, in recent years, instituted stage racing that resembles periods or quarters or dividing the race up into segments. If you want an extreme example of that, we add a fourth stage at the Coca-Cola 600 and literally divide the race up into quarters. And what's coming later this year when Prime and Turner take over the inaugural in-season tournament? Gee, I wonder where they got that idea from. What do all these things have in common, ladies and gentlemen? These are things that the NBA does that, in my view, don't really belong in motorsport, but NASCAR has decided to institute them over the last couple of decades nonetheless.
Checks out.
If you want to die on the hill that you like a guaranteed Game 7 moment, you like what the playoff system provides, that's fine. I very strongly disagree, but I will acknowledge your right to have that opinion. I will acknowledge your right to have the opinion that you want a green flag finish at whatever cost necessary. I will acknowledge your right to have the opinion that you think these races get too strung out. I personally will never understand the desire for less green flag racing. I think our stage cautions in particular are far too long when there's no incident on the racetrack that requires a caution flag. I liked what we experimented with in 2023. I would take that in a heartbeat over throwing the stage cautions. But if that's your cup of tea, that's fine. And listen, people saying the in-season tournament's the straw that broke the camel's back. The straw that broke the camel's back for me happened years ago. So at this point, have your goofy little $1 million in-season tournament. I don't really care. But you cannot tell me with a straight face, as these very serious legal matters are going on, that Mr. Polk wants the sport to be like the NBA, but we're not interested in being like the NBA, when almost every major decision you've made that has impacted your sport in the last 22 years has been a move that resembles what stick and ball sports leagues like the NBA do, that almost no other serious motorsports series worldwide has brought into their sport. So I look at this and I say to myself, and this is coming off of people going through the legal documents. Apparently NASCAR cited an Essentially Sports article in reference 30. I think, was that Matt Weaver, I think, that tweeted that. I just don't know how we're supposed to take NASCAR's side of this lawsuit seriously when that comes out and when a quote like this comes out, when all the evidence suggests that you have been trying to emulate the NBA. And I think the in-season you're calling it the in-season tournament. I mean, I guess the only way you could make it more obvious is if you do what the NBA did, renaming it the NBA Cup for their second season of this. If you rename it the NASCAR Cup at the last minute, which I guess you can't do because that's the name of your top series anyway. But I mean, come on. It's so obvious where you got this idea for the in-season tournament, isn't it? It's just ridiculous to me.
Could call it the NAS Cup. I don't know.
You could. I don't know. I'll give the floor to you guys though now. I don't know, Brenden, Tanner, do you have any thoughts on what's the latest development in this ongoing saga between NASCAR and 2311?
No, as far as using the Essentially Sports article and the lawsuit, I guess I mean that at that level we might as well just start referencing Sportskeeda as well. What are they called? You know,
yeah.
based in India. Like, go ahead. That's fair game.
Yeah, pretty much. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. I'm going to be honest. Everything that I have seen come out of the NASCAR camp from the two different lawsuits that now we have to keep track of. And poor Bob Pockris, he's got a living document going up on Fox Sports' website that he updates every time that there's anything newsworthy that happens with this lawsuit or a couple of lawsuits. So now he's got to keep track of two different things, and that's going to be so messy for him. And I do not envy him in that regard. But
it's a thankless job. Thank him if you can.
Yeah, I every time that I write about the lawsuit, I make sure to include his document and cite him in it. So I'm like, please just go read this. I'm not going to be able to give you a succinct enough summary of it, but everything that NASCAR has done throughout this lawsuit and this newest lawsuit is just so reeking of desperation. And to keep calling the 2311, basically the four pillars of the RTA, a cartel, and continuing to double down on that term through the first lawsuit and now this counter filing is just so Bush League and unprofessional. Imagine this for a second. 5 years ago, saying that Jeff Gordon, Fox Sports presenter and partial team owner of Hendrick Motorsports and one of the greatest that's ever raced in the sport, is a member of an illegal cartel. Imagine saying that to somebody 5 years ago and seeing what their reaction would be. It would be hysterical. They'd just be crying on the floor. So, yeah, it's definitely pretty rich for NASCAR to be like, but no, you're the one doing antitrust. You're the one doing antitrust, actually, by organizing with the team owners like you've done even before 2311 even got here. Because the RTA was established, I believe, in 2016 when the charters were originally brought about by Rob Kaufman and MWR, basically for them to get a paycheck on their way out.
Yeah. I think it might have been established a year before, and then the charters.
You're right.
For 2016, but I think there were the momentum was building towards that as early as 2015, even. But
which is before anything about Michael Jordan being involved in NASCAR ever even came up as anything more than a joke. So yeah, I wrote an article on Pitbox Press this past week, which I urge anybody to check out that's interested in a thought experiment. But I basically put pen to paper saying that we need to start thinking about what this could mean for the sport if they are to lose the antitrust lawsuit. And essentially, I just go through the organizational stuff that would happen should NASCAR lose this lawsuit and any subsequent appeal of it. And, it's a pretty interesting thought experiment. I'm sure it's going to be completely wrong in the event that 2311 and Front Row actually do win this lawsuit. But overall, my thoughts on these comments are just, they're so rich, so rich for all of the reasons Ben has already laid out for all of you. And it's pretty telling when a extremely conservative Supreme Court practically laughs you out of the courtroom in the case of the NCAA NIL suits that came up during COVID, which ultimately went the way of Jeffrey Kessler and the athletes. They were granted a unanimous 9-0 decision over the NCAA to grant athletes the ability to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. And me personally, I thought it was pretty bad that happened, that you get laughed out of the courtroom in that way. But I kind of am seeing through these different motions and court filings from Chris Yates and his broader firm that he works for that I see the makings of why that happened without looking too far into it. So, yeah, I'm just really ready for this all to be done with. Personally, I would like to keep our talk to the racetrack and nothing more, but NASCAR keeps making just the greatest quotables that you could come up with going into this lawsuit, and Jeffrey Kessler just keeps smoking them in the courtroom, and I expect that to continue throughout the rest of Discovery that's going to happen throughout the summer here, and inevitably when we get to the courtroom for real in December, assuming no settlement happens before then.
Yeah, I've just been updating my NASCAR quote book pretty much monthly, I think, ever since the 8 out of 10 fans and we like what we're seeing quotes dropped in whatever that was, 2018, 2019. And it's just been on from there. But I will fully admit, I am no legal expert. I'll defer that to people like Tanner who have been following the lawsuit a little bit more closely. I'll defer that to my editor-in-chief over at lastcard.info, Brock Beard, who actually did go to law school and took the bar exam a few times. I will fully admit my ignorance when it comes to, how a lot of these legal proceedings work. But I do know, I'd like to think I have a pretty good idea of how NASCAR works and how the NBA works. Basketball is probably the number one stick and ball sport that I follow. Although I don't know, soccer's getting up there. I must admit, I've become a pretty big fan of that over the last couple of years. But I know a lot about how the NBA works too. And looking at the decisions that NASCAR has made over the last 2 decades, again, I think the fact that league was singled out in particular in a year where NASCAR is doing this in-season tournament, you can't help but look at these quotes and really struggle to take them seriously in the grander context of everything that's going on here. So again, Tanner, I'm with you. I hope that these issues get resolved sooner rather than later, because I think part of the reason that I haven't been following it as closely is because I'm with you. I want to be talking about what's happening on the racetrack as opposed to what's happening away from the racetrack here. But it is going to be very interesting to see how this all unfolds here in the coming months. So Tanner, Brenden, any final thoughts before we move on here?
It's just sad that we're, going to have to be talking about this for months to come. But it's sad that we have to go through things like this, and anything that takes our attention away from the racetrack is disappointing. That's the bottom line.
One final thing I wanted to add in here is that Curtis Polk is actually part of the formal ownership group that governs 2311 Racing, and I find it a bit odd, and a reason that this case might get thrown out is that they're targeting somebody in the lawsuit when it's already redundant because he's part of the ownership group of 2311. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, but I did find it weird that one owner out of the 3 is being explicitly targeted in the filing for this lawsuit, and I'm more interested in, will the court just throw this filing out and make them file another one, because I don't see any reason to obviously target a particular owner as part of that group out and sue them separately, but also as an owner of the team. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to do on this show is get too deep into politics, but I think, Tanner, to your point, we are more polarized than we've ever been. Anytime you get a 9-0 vote on the Supreme Court these days, I think it's
bad way. You're in a bad way.
That's going to be interesting to continue to follow for sure. Let's try to turn the mood around here, so to speak, and get to our one shining moment here as we come to the end of the show. Brenden, I'll start with you since you've been away for a couple of weeks. What's the one thing that stood out to you from what we saw this weekend?
Yeah, again, it's great to be back. Missed the show, and I got some more chicken to cook outside actually tonight, so I better get going. Aric Brenden got his FS1 debut for the ARCA Menards Series. Whew, what a breath of fresh air that was. Goodness gracious, it is nothing against Jamie Little. She is fantastic on pit road. And I can't even begin to imagine how big of a step it is to take your expertise from pit road and come to the booth and do a bang up job just like the rest of them that have been there for years and years. I don't know how you do that. I'm not prepared to do that today. I'm just saying the way that Jamie Little has come out and done it so far has just not been up to snuff, and it's hard to ignore. And I wish things would improve for her. Did we lose connection, or is everyone just still? Okay, no, I didn't. Okay, we're just still. Okay, like wow, am I gone? But yeah, that aside, that's the negative. The positives is Aric Brenden has been doing a great job on flow racing for a while now, and now here he is with his big break and did a fantastic job. And it was like finally people are like being, I don't know, attention to detail, and it sounds like a broadcast again for the ARCA Menards Series, and I hope he will be added to the list of folks of what's the future going to look like as far as TV play-by-play? Who's it going to be? I hope he gets put into that pipeline, and this better have been an audition for those that are looking for possible people. You got TNT Sports, Prime, NBC. They're all in the hunt now for fresh talent.
Yeah, he definitely did his homework, and you could tell that
amazing job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tanner, what stood out to you this weekend?
I am going to have to go with Josh Berry. My shining moment yesterday might have been a bit more appropriate today, but for those of you that didn't catch our post-race show, I definitely urge you to check it out. But Josh Berry qualified fourth and finished fourth yesterday in what was, in my opinion, one of the greatest runs by Wood Brothers Racing in the next gen era. And they have Josh Berry and, obviously Team Penske's trio of drivers who are very strong on those flatter tracks to thank for that. Berry obviously came into the season with, in my opinion, a lot of question marks, especially with Wood Brothers and Harrison Burton over the past 3 seasons not really performing at the level that you would expect of a Penske satellite team, especially with that team going on to win 3 consecutive titles to start this era. And I'm going to be honest, I think that I sold them very short in my preseason predictions for them. And I think I'm going to have to adjust if they are able to continue that momentum into a top 10 style run next week at Las Vegas. But I want to focus on the here and now, and man, Josh Berry, he was in the top 10 all day. I believe his average running position was around 9th, which is extremely impressive for a guy that spent much of last season kind of toiling away in the tatters of Stewart-Haas Racing and whatever was left on that team. And you really just got to tip your cap to that Wood Brothers Racing team. They retooled with their new driver and are clearly showing a different side of themselves that they haven't shown yet in the next gen era. And if they can continue this level of performance, they definitely are in the conversation to me to get into the postseason and perhaps even make it a round or 2 further than they normally would.
Yeah, that's a great moment as well. And speaking of finishing fourth, I think Adam brought it up here at the very beginning of the show, kind of gave mine away. But want to give another call to Ryan Sieg. That team, of course, does a lot with a little and continues to knock on the door of breaking through to victory lane. I think it's a lot like Sheldon Creed at this point. You just have to wonder, what do they have to do to finally achieve that P1 finishing position? And if they continue to run like this, I would think it's going to be coming for them at some point. But a good run for them nonetheless, and we'll keep our eye on them as the season continues on here. Probably the top independent family-run team in the Xfinity Series right now with how they've been running the last couple of years. So that's my one shining moment, and that is our show for tonight. So thank you all so much for sticking with us. A lot to discuss this weekend, so we thank you all for tuning in as always. And if you like what you saw, you can follow at Grid Network TV on all our social media platforms, X/Twitter, Threads, or Blue Sky, whichever microblogging platform you're using these days. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, and most importantly, if you want to support the channel, subscribe to us right here on YouTube. And like I said at the start of the show, if you really liked what you saw this evening, you can consider joining Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in Grid Network, helping us continue to expand our coverage throughout the rest of the 2025 season and beyond. You can also become a member through the Grid Network YouTube channel, or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution to us instead, you can use the YouTube Super Chat or Super Thanks feature, or visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below as well. Now, taking a look at our upcoming schedule here, don't miss Grid Tonight on Wednesday with Kobe Lambeth, Josh Birch, and Matt White. Stay tuned. Women in Motorsports is hopefully going to be making a return here over the next couple of weeks. I need to talk with Joe and Emily and maybe Isha as well to see what that schedule is going to look like. But certainly a lot to talk about on that front as well, with Catherine Legg making her debut this weekend, and the Indy next season starting up with Haley Deegan, Sophia Flourish, and it'll be F1 Academy season as well before you know it. So stay tuned for that show coming back eventually. And then our new pre-race show format. Tanner, I think you guys are going to be live Thursday night once again here. Is that correct for NASCAR pre-race?
Looking that way at the moment, yes.
So stay tuned for our coverage there. And then, of course, Formula One's back this weekend in Australia. We'll have a wrap-up show this weekend to follow as well. And then we'll see you right here back on Encore here in a week. Brenden, Tanner, any final thoughts before we sign off for good this evening?
Again, it's great to meet you, Tanner, and glad to share the stage with you on a very weird weekend for Phoenix Raceway. Looking forward to getting this season going a little bit more.
Yeah, and it was great sharing the platform with you tonight, Brenden, and looking forward to many more episodes with you and Ben, obviously throughout this very busy season. And it's about time that Phoenix Raceway finally held a good race to a majority of the fan base for Cup, and I'm hoping that we get a similar product going into the fall race for the championship.
All I'm going to say on this issue is, if you have a hot take, don't hide behind your burner account. Just say it with your name and face to everybody. Stand behind what you have to say. That's what we try to do here on the Encore show. It's what I try to do on social media. If you know, you know.
There's a lot of sad, strange little men out there.
There you go. That's all I'm going to say on that. For Brenden Crossland, for Tanner Smith, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week. Stay tuned to the rest of our programming throughout this week right here on the Grid Network.